Recording in progress.
One minute. Joel Clark.
I wish I did. I haven't like this long, yeah, so it wasn't like I like it. But isn't it like a moment of regret and or isn't that actually inside? Yeah, it's like I like you're
No, I didn't think. Just it was takes me like that.
if I had straight hair, I would show you it's like
I get it.
I mean, I don't know. You want to take one of us in this thing? I just look. It's something to know about it. It's like, I don't really have issues with it. Because I go and you get that. It's nothing. It's for selling. Well, like, that's what I want to you didn't get I don't know. I think it's like that. I feel it's like it might be your that makes sense. And then I can take that, and now it's not to where it is. That's what I I was very good at it, guys. It's like they have me drop like I was doing my job, saved me. I was quarantining. No, I was doing I had to just take care of it. I was
All right, let's get going. Thank you so much for coming. Great to see a nice full house here at the Korea Society. And I know we also have 200 people signed up to watch this stream it virtually. So thank you very much, Ambassador Bunny Jenkins and Major Jessica Taylor. You've drawn quite a crowd. I think that's a testament to the good work that you're doing. So welcome to today's program, Deterring North Korea. My name is Jonathan Corrado. I'm the Director of Policy here at the Korea Society. Today in this discussion, we are going to explore how the US-Korea alliance can respond to threats posed by Pyongyang's evolving nuclear, missile, and space capabilities, as well as its proliferation and procurement activities. And a lot of headlines should be jumping out at you when I say all of that. I want to jump right in today because we've got so much to talk about. So first I'll introduce our honored guest. First, we've got Ambassador Bonnie Denise Jenkins, PhD, who has served as the Undersecretary for Arms Control and International Security since July 2021. As Undersecretary, she leads 3 bureaus: the Arms Control Compliance and Verification Bureau, the International Security Non-Proliferation Bureau, and the Political Military Affairs Bureau. In addition, as of May 2023, Secretary of State Antony Blinken named Undersecretary Jenkins as the senior official to lead the department's efforts on AUKUS implementation. So whenever I feel really busy and tapped out, I'm just going to remind myself that you wear like 5 hats. Undersecretary Jenkins previously served in the Obama administration as special envoy and coordinator for threat reduction programs in the Bureau of International Security and Non-Proliferation from July 2009 until January 2017. From its inception in 2017 until April 2021, Ambassador Jenkins was the founder, executive director, and board chair of Women of Color Advancing Peace and Security, which is, I believe, how you met Major Jessica Taylor. Welcome. Thank you so much for joining us, Ambassador. Major Jessica Taylor, U.S. Air Force Reserve, is a non-resident fellow in the Indo-Pacific Security Initiative at the Atlantic Council Scowcroft Center for Strategy and Security. She's currently pursuing her PhD in international relations with a focus on Indo-Pacific at Princeton University's School of Public and International Affairs. She's a regular guest here at the Korea Society and a good friend of ours. Thank you so much for coming today, Jessica. Before I turn it over to our panelists, I want to thank the Korea Foundation and our corporate sponsors for making this program possible. Ambassador Jenkins, I was hoping we could start with you. Could you please provide us with a bit of an overview? What are the challenges of deterring North Korea in 2024? And what is the U.S. ROC alliance strategy to address these challenges?
Great. So first of all, I do have a short introductory remarks here, but first of all, I want to thank you for inviting me. And we've been trying to make this happen for a while, so glad that we can finally do that. So thank you for this. So I'm just going to say a few things, just kind of start out, and then we can go from there. So I want to highlight that we marked a historic milestone last year. It was the 70th anniversary of the U.S. ROK Alliance. As an alliance, we are growing ever stronger in the face of new and evolving threats. In 2023, the same year as this milestone, we observed the DPRK continue its unprecedented pace of ballistic missile launches in violation of multiple U.S. Security Council resolutions and at enormous cost to its people. They began 2024 much the same way they ended 2023, with an ICBM test on January 15th and several cruise missile tests. The DPRK has also engaged in threatening and irresponsible rhetoric regarding its weapons programs, including by characterizing some of its missile launches and other military activities as trial runs for the use of nuclear weapons. Each missile launch and nuclear saber-rattling speech demonstrates the DPRK's determination to advance its unlawful WMD and ballistic missile programs, underscoring the importance of growing and adapting our alliance with the Republic of Korea to better prepare to defend against potential attacks, including nuclear deployment. The U.S. is committed to the defense of the Republic of Korea and our defense remains ironclad, and our goal remains a complete denuclearization of the Korean Peninsula. The Biden administration is pursuing a calibrated response to the DPRK's escalatory actions based on the degree of threat they pose to the United States and our allies. Enhancing and strengthening extended deterrence to the Republic of Korea is a priority of the administration. In 2023, we took significant steps toward that goal. Last April, President Biden and President Yoon announced the Washington Declaration, which established the new Nuclear Consultative Group, or NCG, and called for increased military exercises, simulations, and enhancing the visibility of strategic asset deployments to the Korean Peninsula. These steps illustrate President Biden's and President Yoon's resolve to address the DPRK's dangerous and destabilizing activities and rhetoric through a stronger deterrent effort. The NCG met twice in 2023, once in Seoul and once in Washington. At these meetings, both sides recognized that U.S. ROK nuclear deterrence cooperation has deepened as progress has been achieved in frequent meetings of the NCG work group or NCG work streams that include guidelines, security and information sharing protocols, nuclear consultation processes in crisis and contingencies, strategic communications, exercises, simulations, and training and risk reduction practices. The NCG has also allowed us to deepen cooperation, learning, and engagement among our interagency partners. One key example is extended nuclear deterrence immersion course that the United States hosted this past November in Washington for interagency colleagues from the ROK government. In addition to establishing the NCG, the United States and the Republic of Korea reconvened annual meetings of the Extended Deterrence Strategy and Consulting Group, or EDSCG, in 2022 and 2023, after a 4-year hiatus. State co-chairs the EDSCG with the Department of Defense. The forum is valuable and unique for enabling conversation about the holistic security challenges facing the alliance in the Indo-Pacific region. It is also mutually complementary with the NCG and other alliance bodies. In the 4th meeting of the EDSCG held last September, my co-chairs and I reaffirmed the commitment of our nations to use all available levers, including diplomatic, informational, military, and economic tools, to reinforce the U.S. security commitment to the ROK. We are dedicated to a whole-of-government approach that considers military capabilities, strategic messaging, and risk reduction measures. Through these and other efforts to enhance extended deterrence, the United States and ROK are taking prudent steps in the face of advancing deterring nuclear capabilities, as well as destabilizing and dangerous. It is important to recall U.S. policy on this issue. Any nuclear attack by North Korea against the United States or its allies is unacceptable and will result in the end of the Kim regime, and any nuclear attack by the DPRK against the LOK will be met with a swift, overwhelming, and decisive response. I want to emphasize the enduring commitment of both the United States and the Republic of Korea to the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty, which is the bedrock of the global nuclear. The ROK covenant has been clear in its rejection of any intent to develop an independent nuclear arsenal and continues to reaffirm its commitment to the NPT and the ironclad U.S. commitment to the security of ROK. The United States recognizes that in today's security environment, our efforts to maintain and strengthen deterrence must be paralleled by a continued charge toward diplomacy and dialogue to resolve difficult security challenges. As such, both the United States and the Republic of Korea remain steadfast in our pursuit of dialogue with the DPRK without preconditions, and see diplomacy as the only viable means of achieving lasting peace on the Korean. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much, Ambassador Jenkins. You teed up a lot of stuff that we're going to get a chance to dig into later. And I was really happy to hear all that progress that's been made on the NCG. Not sure what was going on from the outside. That's very heartening to hear that all that has been done. So I'll ask you one follow-up here, and then I'm going to turn to Major Jessica Taylor for her take on everything that's going on. So over the past few years, as you well know, North Korea has been testing and developing platforms that pose significant challenges to our ally deterrence posture. Just to name a few, this includes satellite surveillance and solid fuel ICBMs, which improve the accuracy and range of North Korea's nuclear arsenal. And they've got all sorts of exotic delivery vehicles, sea-based, land-based, air-based. There are concerns about missile defense as it currently stands. So my question for you is, do we currently assess that North Korea has second strike capability? Do they have the ability to withstand an initial nuclear blow and then continue to use nuclear forces in a retaliation? And how can the US and South Korea evolve in order to meet this advancing threat?
I think the one thing to consider is that we are recognizing and paying close attention to developments in the DPRK within their military capabilities. And one of the things that we do on a regular basis is continue to assess our own deterrence capabilities. I think sometimes we'll think that we have deterrence and that's kind of it, and that's what we decide that we're going to do in terms of any country talk about deterrence, but it's a continuing effort. And as we see the developments that's happening in North Korea with the ballistic missile test, with other things that you mentioned, we continue to reassess our abilities to deter. And I would just say, and I think everybody knows, there are some countries that we call hard targets. And I don't mean targeting in terms of targeting, but hard targets in terms of our abilities to deter and the challenges to deter, particularly when you have countries that don't want to have diplomatic engagements with us, right? Our offers. So what I would say is, assessing what their capabilities are part of the process, and that's going on a regular basis, and that's something that our Department of Defense is looking at, in terms of hard security deterrence. We're looking at in terms of diplomatic side and how we can engage them, and it's a continuous effort as we look at the advancements of that country, of other countries, as we ensure that we're able to defend ourselves and defend our allies and our.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Professor Jenkins. So Jessica, over to you. So what more can be done? Talking about another THAAD battery, more integration with Japan and trilateral, right? These kinds of things have been mentioned. So what's your assessment?
Well, first, I want to thank Ambassador Jenkins for being here and taking the time and all the work that you do for women of color in the national security space and molding us and getting us ready for our next steps. And also thank you to my good friend Jonathan for having me. You took the words right out of my mouth really when we're talking about missile defense. We do need to see more cooperation between Japan, South Korea, and the US, especially in missile defense arenas. And that's starting to come to be. And the more that we see that, I think that will give more public assurance. But as far as where the DPRK is going, I think that's why it's so important that we're paying attention to the fact that he's paying so much attention to the Navy. And, you know, wanting to possibly go after a secondary capability in the submarine arena. So that is, if we ever see that achieved, it's going to bring more questions about whether or not the US will come to South Korea's aid, and we're just going to be able, they have to be able to be ahead of that.
Very well said. Okay, so let's go to the question of South Korea potentially developing its own nuclear weapon. So recently, South Korean President Yoon Suk Yeol reiterated South Korea's commitment to the non-proliferation treaty. However, when you look at survey results of just normal South Korean people, it suggested that there's anxiety in Korea about America's commitment to defend South Korea from an attack. Over 70% of respondents in a survey by the Che Institute for Advanced Studies were in favor of Korea developing its own weapons, and over 60% expressed doubts that the US would defend Korea if the North threatened the US mainland with a nuclear reprisal. So we heard a lot about what we're doing through the NCG to try to address those fears and bring South Korea into the process. So how can we really reassure? I know reassurance is it's an unfillable bucket, right? But what can we do?
We have to keep doing what we're doing. I mean, like you said, it's hard to always know what is the exact thing we need to do to like convince everybody and to feel more confident in the US commitment. So, you know, we did the Washington agreement, as I said. We started a new group, the NCG. We reestablished the other extended deterrence talks that we have. We, you know, during the NCG, we had a SSBM visit South Korea. We had the B-52 also there. So we're doing everything that we can. We will continue to do this, you know, because we recognize that there still is a significant amount of public in South Korea that still doubts US commitment, which we have said several times is ironclad. So I think it's going to be something that we have to do, working closely with our ROK colleagues to continue to push the message. And we understand that as you have more significant tests by North Korea, as they continue to build up their military, that will naturally create a concern. So we understand exactly what is the case. But we will continue to do activities that they will help. But it's going to be very important for us to work with the ROK who's over there, able to see their public and try to figure out what are the words, what are the key ways in which we continue to reassure them of our commitment.
Exactly. So Jessica, over to you, and maybe even thinking through the next time North Korea does a provocation, you know, what can we do to make sure that extended deterrence message is really clear to both the adversary, because we're doing deterrence at the same time that we're doing assurance to our ally.
So I first would say that I'm not at all surprised that continues to be the sentiment in South Korea, because these things take time. It's just like within an interpersonal relationship, whenever there's been trials, tribulations, it takes a while to regain that trust. So I don't think that we should necessarily be surprised by it, but at the same time, too, I think that's what Jenkins said, you know, we need to keep doing what we're doing. But there's, in thinking through that, you know, I was in South Korea in October and just recently in January. There's a lot of concerns about our upcoming election, and we need to be able to move past concerns that a change in the administration will bring back a change in policy. So try to institutionalize a relationship where it can go through possible ebbs and flows and not go through, you know, tensions in the relationship. I think a big part of that is going to be, like, as Ambassador Jenkins said, we've brought back some of these meetings, media CG, like, we need to make sure that in the future that we don't give up alliance equities that could possibly affect readiness, whether it's our military exercises or whether it's these forums, because the big amount of space does have an effect on the relationship and reassuring our practice.
The other thing is also, you know, helping our Korean, public understand to show that, you know, we're the responsible party. We are transparent, and we have military exercises. we let people know, we want to be seen as responsible, obviously the DPRK is not. So I mean, there's leading by example, in the sense that, we want to be seen as, we abide by the NPT, we promote the NPT. We still see it as a valuable part of our national security, for global security, for promoting the norms. We're not violating Security Council resolutions like DPRK is impeached with the protests that they do. They're having new relationships with countries like Russia. I mean, so part of it is, having these showing with the summary visit, with the NCG talks and EDSDG, we do press releases after those, push those out to the public. But also showing that we are trying to be responsible, in what we're doing, and leading by example now.
Absolutely, and I really like this assurance as a practice and a relationship that gets reinforced and compounded over time through these personal relationships, and through the institutionalization you mentioned, Jessica. And so some of the things that we're seeing in terms of institutionalization to kind of hedge against potential future crosswinds are baking institutionally a lot of this trilateral cooperation with Japan. That's been really heartening progress to see. And then the other thing is starting up the conversation on burden sharing a little bit early. I saw that in the headlines and thought that was maybe a good idea, right? I was wondering if you could tell us a little bit about these extended deterrence strategic dialogue. So just for some of us from the outside, like, what is that? And what do we talk about there? What gets accomplished? Why is that beneficial?
They're beneficial for some of the reasons we just talked about, in terms of showing the public, both here in South Korea, but also in North Korea, as you said, the commitment that we have to South Korea, the commitment that we have to that relationship, the commitment that we have to the defense. So that's one is the signal in messaging, so that everyone is aware of that and can hopefully combat some of the things that you mentioned about the public. But on the other hand, it's really, to have these dialogues with South Korea, as we have, as you mentioned with Japan, it's really to make sure that we have an understanding of these relationships. So, as I said, the NCG, I mentioned some of the things that they're discussing, some of the nuclear aspects. And then the EDSCG, which I lead with my counterparts, Department of Defense, is much more broad in terms of the type of things we look at in terms of our relationship. So, I mean, they're viable discussions, because you need to have these discussions with partners and allies, but it's a huge message aspect, which we have to keep doing, as I just said earlier, to make sure that the public in both DPRK, leadership of DPRK, and our local colleagues understand and see what we're doing in our commitments to this.
Excellent, thank you. So Jessica, I'm going to turn to you on the trilateral angle. So we've seen the increasing importance of strategic triangles in the region, the US, South Korea, and Japan, tightening trilateral coordination on the one hand, and then North Korea, Russia, and China as a sort of third wheel to that triangle, increasing their relationship. So I'd like to ask you to focus on this trilateral cooperation. So in terms of the US, South Korea, Japan angle, what's going on here? What's our homework? What more can we do? And where do you see this going?
So I'll go back to the missile defense comment that, we're starting to see that come online. And I think as that becomes more institutionalized, that increases our deterrent. But there's always so much focus on the military aspects, but I think there's so many other aspects of this trilateral relationship and the bilateral relationships across the relationship that need to be more considered. So Ambassador Jenkins brought up a whole government approach, but we need a whole government approach also to trilateral cooperation. I noticed the other day that some of the polling data coming out of South Korea specifically, and in Japan to some respects as well, where there's still a good majority of the South Korean public that questions the trajectory of the South Korea-Japanese relationship. And I think that's going to take more people ties to really strengthen that trilateral bond. And as far as the China angle, I mean, I'm guessing we're going to get to a simultaneous question of conflict there. I think that's going to pose some challenges with issues across the Taiwan Strait, but people also don't talk enough about the possibility of conflict with the Philippines, China, and how that might possibly affect bilateral cooperation as far as how we consider simultaneous conflict. Because Japan also has a part possibly with the Japanese, Philippines, and US trilateral cooperation.
Excellent, thank you so much. I think that's for Jenkins, over to you on that same question. Trilateral between the US, Korea, and Japan. Where is it going? What's our homework there?
Well, we see that in the report, obviously, I mean, we have, as I said, we have these things with terrorist talks, not just with, okay, but with Japan as well. And we hope to have, more trilateral discussions, right? We're not there yet in terms of having kind of experienced in both countries in the trilateral sense. But that's something that we want to continue to pursue, because when you talk about the region, we're talking about they're okay, but our relationship with Japan is also very important, and our relationship with them in terms of deterrence, okay, is also very important. And it's not, I mean, DPRK is not the only region concerned about. Obviously, you mentioned PRC as well. So, it's really looking at the strategies of the entire region. We're looking at two countries now, but there's a strategy for the whole region. And how we deal with DPRK and how we deal with PRC is also part of that larger strategy.
And if I could add one more thing here, we're seeing the institutionalization of trilateral exercises, and I would say that another thing that needs to be considered long term is operationalizing these exercises and the relationship, meaning that as we look at if there was a contingency on the peninsula or elsewhere, what our operational plans are for dealing with those contingencies. So it's one thing to have military exercises, it's different to have operational plans that you are exercising against.
Good point. Okay, so Ambassador Jenkins, now we get to talk about Russia. So North Korean two-way proliferation with Russia has surpassed anything we've seen in the past, serving as a major blow to the sanctions regime on North Korea and the international effort to deprive Russia of material support for its illegal invasion. In exchange for North Korea providing Russia with both artillery and ballistic missiles, which we've seen in theater in Ukraine, we believe that North Korea has received various military assistance and access to international finance. So how would you characterize the nature of this threat, and what should the US and its allies do to counteract it?
I would characterize it as a very serious concern, serious threat, because we do have both two countries of strong concern right now, not only just DPRK and what they have been doing, but also Russia and invading Ukraine working together. And Russia's giving us a lot of problems in many forms and many situations, not just in this situation, but in many other ways. So it's a one of serious concern. It not only is destabilizing for the region, it's also providing Russia with more ways in which we can continue to fight in Ukraine. It's challenging Security Council resolutions. It's challenging our sanctions regimes, as you said, the non-proliferation treaty. I mean, it's just doing a lot of damage, and so we are very much speaking out against it, working with our partners to make sure that they're also speaking out against this. Looking at how we can use sanctions as we have been using based on this relationship that they have, despite the fact that they continue to do these things in violation of sanctions. We continue to recognize that those things do have an important role. And looking at all the tools that we have that we have to deal with North Korea, work with countries to ensure that they are speaking about the importance of Security Council resolutions, looking at interdiction things that we can do, so we're looking at all of our tools and figuring out how we can strengthen and adjust our tools to address what is a very concerning situation, and a very dangerous relationship.
We see them both empowered and enabled by one another to do more. And it's the way I kind of thought about it. It's, we've sent North Korea to the doghouse, but now Russia's in the doghouse and Iran to a certain extent. So there's so many countries there that are having a little buffet.
Yeah, we have countries that have agreed to Security Council resolution, violating very resolutions that they agreed to. So it's a huge concern and, what they could be, we don't know what they're saying to each other, what they're hoping to sell each other, some things, but. It's just not good and, and Russia, of course, wants to get as much as they can. It feels unjust war in Ukraine, so it's getting a lot of attention within the US and with our allies in the world.
Jessica, any thought on this one?
Well, it's really your thoughts, because you and Marcus's article in Foreign Affairs touched on this greatly, and I thought it made a lot of key points. And one thing that I'll just add to the conversation is that when you brought up in that article the necessity of just getting more of our allies and partners on board and strengthening our surveillance of sanctions violations activities. It is very much so necessary. But it also brings back to the whole government approach again, because if we want to make sure we're supporting Korea as Korea puts on its own sanctions with Russia, that is also going to come to play with making sure that we have diversity of economies and we're supporting each other's our shared prosperity so that they have the ability to use other markets is very important.
Yeah, and there's, in terms of sanctions implementation, sanctions on a piece of paper don't mean very much if they're not being enforced. So you've got two categories of the country, of jurisdictions that are not enforcing, and that's those that lack the political will, or that's Russia and to a certain extent China. And then you've got countries that have the political will, they just don't have the capacity. And so those countries we can work with, right? We can help to build up that capacity. There's a lot of great organizations that are doing that are getting funding from the US State Department. So that's really good work. And we should keep doing that. For the countries that don't have the capacity, that's the really tricky thing. And that's something that we have to look at again to see what more done.
And I think you raised the point is new challenge. And I think, as I tell a lot of my colleagues right now, we're facing different challenges. Some are new, some are just different. Some are obviously growing in some areas. And so we're seeing new challenges to our sanctions. We're seeing, because the relationship itself, as I said, just creates more problems in a lot of different areas. So, the thing about terrorism, the thing about, tools that we can use, it's always evolving. It's always evolving. As the threats evolve, we have to keep evolving, and adjusting and seeing what works and seeing what doesn't work. And that's what people are doing, in government, particularly, is looking at these changes, looking at the situation and adjusting. And DOD is looking from their side, states looking at this side, and the other parts of the government are looking at it from their side. But we have an interagency process for doing that. But I think it just raises, this is where we are. These are the challenges. And we just have to keep figuring out the best way to maintain, the peace that we need on the peninsula and in the region.
Okay, so we're going to talk about simultaneity now. This question comes from our partners at the Atlantic Council, Indo-Pacific Security Initiative, where I recently spoke about AUKUS with Marcus Karlauskas. So thanks to our friend Dipsy at the Atlantic Council for this question. With military threats from China and North Korea increasing and diversifying, the risk of simultaneous conflicts in the Indo-Pacific is rising. How does this change our deterrence strategy? What additional challenges does this present to the United States and its partners and allies in deterring North Korea? How could we turn simultaneity to our advantage? So a lot of tough ones there.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's kind of what we're thinking about. I mean, a lot of these are issues that are raised because it's actually happening. So we are in the process of thinking about these very things. As we look at a situation now, we have many have talked about this. How we have another nuclear power to worry about. We always said worry about. China was always there, but now it's increasing this nuclear weapons. On track for 1,000 by 2030. So, it raises new challenge in terms of deterrence and how we deal with that situation. I think the important thing is there aren't a whole lot of answers now because we're dealing with this, we're figuring it out. In terms of how do we deal with these new challenges in those questions and other ones. So it's a process. It's a process that's very and we keep using the word challenging, but that's what it is. But, you know, we try to figure it out, and that's what we're doing.
So Jessica, prospect of a two-front war in Asia, what do we do?
I'll first thank Marcus for bringing me on his team, but also sarcastically thank him for bringing up this very difficult question. So, you know, when I think of, and we talked about this a lot with Marcus, with the simultaneous conflict concerns. I first go back to institutionalization and authorization of military plans. You know, if we eventually possibly get there where we are able to operationalize our plans, to look at the possibility of having a two-front conflict, and what that looks like is, because we don't have a NATO system, what does that look like with the different mini lounges in the region, whether it's the Philippines, Japan, US, the possibility of US, Japan, and also just looking at the ways that the different possibilities the way the allies might contribute in a conflict. For instance, South Korea might decide to be on the only logistics or humanitarian front. We don't know those different options yet in a Taiwan scenario. So, you know, it's hard to look at the possibility of or seeing any advantage of simultaneity, but in thinking about it, the only one I can possibly think of is if we get to the point where we are institutionalizing our relationships in the region in a more like cohesive, unilateral manner, that puts more pressure on China, because at least from what China watchers have said, that China does not support the possibility of a simultaneous conflict. So that possibly that would increase deterrence to keep these things from happening. It's the only possible thing that I can think of that might be positive from the possibility of simultaneous conflict.
Right. Because the simultaneity offers the opportunity for our adversaries to pose a lot of dilemmas to us in terms of how do we work with our allies to respond to both at the same time. Another thing that Marcus has brought up.
But I also think that once again, as I said, these are things that we're thinking about in the US. These are also things that we think about with our allies and our partners. In terms of the discussion we have, because as we've said several times, I mean, these new challenges increase the need that we have to work with them. We have anyway, but I think increasingly, as we look at, whether it's deterrence or just in addition to that, like export controls and sanctions and interdictions and actions we do in terms of security type of solutions, no matter what it is, we need to work with our, not just the ones in Europe, not just the UK and Japan, not just in the regions, but our NATO allies and other allies as well. Because these are global challenges. And so we need to, as the challenges continue, it also increases the need for us to.
I'm really encouraged to see you say that and to talk about how this is the values-based coalition. That it's not Pacific partners over here and European partners over here, and never the twain shall meet. There's been some discussion about that, right? And some advocates for that type of approach where we need to segment now and we need to devote our energies more towards this problem and that problem, and a little bit of pushback saying, no, we're the United States. We got to do both at the same time. The other thing I wanted to mention was Marcus Garlauskas' point, which is that posing a question, are the combatant commands that are set up in the Indo-Pacific poised to respond well to a simultaneous attack? And his response is no, they're not. You've got USFK and USFJ with their specific responsibilities, and that Indo-Pacific kind of the overarching responsibility, and with the chance that China can get involved in the North Korea contingency, then who's in charge there, right? Because the Pacific wants to get into the ballgame, and USFK kind of has seniority there in terms of dealing with the peninsula. So it just gets so complicated so fast. So proposing a rethink of how we maybe do the division of labor between our combatant commands.
Yeah, I mean, that's something I visit combatant commands, which and I ask that question very often about the division of labor, but they do have overall they have opportunities to have these overall conversations with amongst the combatant commands on these particular issues, because it is coming up. And each command I visit, they say, yes, we are having these conversations with other combatant commands. To try to decide on these kind of things. So once again, new challenges, there's thinking and action to figure out how to deal with these because they are new. So we don't have a lot of, it's not like we have an answer right now, we're doing it, we're in the process. This is the challenge to develop, we are also developing. And I think that's the important thing to take away is, looking at the way things are is because they hadn't happened before. And so now they're happening. So we're developing.
Yeah, great point. That's got anything on that one? Or
I think that, it's not just the concern about, because it always comes up because of China, right? And then how the different bilateral alliances will work together. But even on the Korean Peninsula, when we consider, like we were talking about earlier about a provocation or some type of hostile activity, there's also discussions about a rethink of the way the command structure is on the Korean Peninsula. As far as, Combined Forces Command doesn't become a war fighting unit until DEFCON 2 is declared. So if there's a provocation or some type of hostile act that the alliance or South Korea wants to respond, like making sure that we have the mechanisms in place to lower the threshold of conflict to do so is also very important.
that's very important. So before we return to our audience questions, so please prepare your audience questions and identify yourself, and then keep your questions short and sweet so we can get to more than just one, so no monologues, please. But before we get to that, and we'll get microphones out to you, I wanted to ask, so there's a lot of young people in this audience, students in this audience, people who have aspirations to do very much the things that you two are doing. So any advice from your experience that you might impart to them?
Yes, obviously you can hear the challenges that we're facing now. And I think it's important that we continue to have people who are passionate, who are interested to be part of how we resolve these questions. New thinking about approaches, new ways of looking at things, I think is going to be important. Because these are, we've had challenges. We've had, 9/11, we've had back to the Soviet Union fell apart, and even before that, he had challenges. And, we always have to kind of sit back and think about what does this mean in terms of how we continue to advance some kind of stability in the international system. How do we work with partners and allies to make sure that we can answer these new threats? And we are at a point right now where we are seeing things that we don't know the answer. We don't know necessarily where things going to end. And some of the conflicts that are happening now, and goes way beyond just the Korean Peninsula we're talking about now, which is things that we need to answer to. And so we need a next generation to really think about these. And I hope that there is a lot of interest from young people to get involved in these harder questions, because we do need answers to these harder questions, because we don't know what the world's going to look like 20 years from now. But now it's time to be thinking about it. So I encourage everyone, if you're interested in this, continue to do it.
Wonderful.
I need you.
That's good.
I would say two things. One, the importance of finding good mentors, like Ambassador Jenkins. Folks that are not only have paved paths for us, but have a willingness to do like Ambassador Jenkins has done and really try to mold the next generation. It's so important to have people to look up to and see people, especially that look like you, are doing things that you want to do. Another thing I would say is doing things that scare you, like panels at the Korea Society, because they really do help you grow and help you evolve and meet new people. So just not being afraid to do those things that scare you, to include, as our good friend Jonathan said in the audience, like reminded me right before this, making sure you're writing and publishing and getting your ideas out there. Thank you for that reminder, Betty, right?
Wonderful, thank you so much. So let's turn to our audience now. Please raise your hand if you have a question. We'll get a microphone. Ambassador Eller, get a microphone down to you.
I am Susan Elliott with the National Committee on American Foreign Policy. We do a lot with the Korea Society. We also do track two discussions on North Korea. And I guess I wondered, this is more related to China and how the US and China after President Biden met with President Xi, for you, Ambassador Jenkins. Since they agreed to start doing some mill-to-mill cooperation, is there any, is this a topic North Korea that might be on the agenda between the US and China? Because I do think, it's my personal opinion, that China doesn't want North Korea to become more well-developed or to drop a nuclear bomb or even test a nuclear weapon. So I just wondered in your thoughts on, or if that is something that, you know, where the US is considering doing.
We are always interested in having conversations with peers. Okay, in areas where we can have good conversation or just conversation. And that's obviously not just on these issues, but there's a number of issues that we're working to have a conversation with the PRC. On the mill to mill, of course, that's good because it was a point when the PRC did not want to talk with our military. And so the fact that that's moving forward is very good. I don't think China is in China's interest to see the Korea blow up or North Korea to get extremely more aggressive because it's really not, it's not in anyone's interest in the region. So hopefully the bill talks will continue. There's other talks also, you know, so these kind of exchanges are good. We also hope that we can follow up on the meetings that we had in November when we had a chance to talk about strategic stability and crisis management. The more we can have transparency to the PRC, the better. Particularly when you're talking about concerns about what we're talking about on our security issues and about the development of nuclear weapons, which is, you know, more than obviously they've ever had and on pace for 1,000, as I said, by 2030. So having as much transparency as we can is good. So even if we can't get to a point where we can have an arms control discussion, can we at least talk about strategic stability? Can we at least talk about crisis management? Can we at least have an understanding, you know, on how we can ensure that either one does something that the other one is nervous about? So the mill-to-mill is great, and we hope that we can continue to have more discussions on these other issues as well.
I'll just add that you know, I do hope that those conversations are happening and delighted to hear that that's the aim. But I would also say that I hope that our allies and partners, especially, you know, not only just in the region, but also our NATO partners and EU partners are also having those discussions and just adding to the audience and folks that are concerned to possibly feel more pressure on China to help with the situation.
Yeah, and on that, some of our partners are also having conversations. So I mean, and to that point, we always encourage all my violence. I say, if you have a good relationship with China, can you at least tell them that they need to talk to us? Because some countries have different relationships with them, and so another one of why we have to have partners and do this multilaterally. But some of our partners are also having more conversations. So.
This is such a frustrating one because throughout the Cold War, the US and the Soviet Union were able to engage in these types of topics, no matter how at odds we were. And there's the perception that China does not view these kinds of confidence building measures, crisis communications, does not view them as mutually beneficial. Yeah, and on that point, there's two things on that. One is on the Russia situation, very true. We've been able to have these conversations during the Cold War. Unfortunately, more recently, with their actions with the New START treaty and suspending that, and all their other actions that they're doing in terms of getting out of like the CFE treaty,
de-ratifying the CT comprehensive nuclear test ban treaty and their actions in like the biological weapons convention process, the non-proliferation non-proliferation treaty situation. They're being more obstructionist and they're not being able to decouple like they used to do. They're attaching everything now to Ukraine. And so that's making it difficult to have those traditional conversations where by that and say this is above a lot of those things. On the China side, we have never, this is different because I don't think we haven't had these kind of conversations with them in the past. And so we don't have that history with them. At least there we can say we don't have that history of decoupling or their decoupling. And I think that's more challenging for them. And that's something we'd like to get to. But at this point, Russia's pushing back on us having conversations. And we also we're trying to get China to the table. So it's very challenging.
So I want to get to one of our questions from our virtual audience. So David Brunstrom from Reuters asked the question about South Korea's indigenous weapons, which I think we addressed very well. And now we'll get to one from Lynn Turk from the Pacific Century Institute. So Lynn asks, how much more dangerous is the situation in Korea given Kim Jong-un's February 9th speech? So that's a speech where he threatened to attack South Korea if provoked. And that has spurred much conversation about whether North Korea's strategic aims have changed and to what degree. So what is your assessment?
Ours, well, obviously it's not a great speech. And it's not something that is going to lead to any more stability or in the region. But for us, we still are maintaining the same position we had before, which is we are open to dialogue at any time with them. We still seek a peninsula without nuclear weapons. So we hear that, we know that that's definitely not going in the right direction, but that hasn't necessarily changed our position in terms of wanting to have some dialogue, but also, strongly supporting the ROK, strongly supporting Japan in terms of our extended deterrence.
And the statement was conditional, right? It didn't say we will attack South Korea and that's our plan. It said if triggered, whenever we are provoked or attacked. So it's a conditional assertion. So in that sense, we've seen this before, right? It's not a new type of.
Yeah, it reminds me of Russia's de-ratifying the comprehensive test ban treaty. It said we are de-ratifying the treaty, but we won't test unless you test first. To the US, which we already said many times ad nauseum. We haven't tested in the past 30 years, so we have no intention of doing a nuclear test. So it's that same kind of condition. But yeah, you're right, they did condition it.
That's good. Thoughts.
I would say that I'm a bit concerned about, again, going back to the possibility of hostile acts, and then we respond, and then does this come into play, especially as North Korea has mentioned wanting to move the maritime boundary, and then we're going into fishing season.
Yeah.
What is considered a hostile act from their standpoint, or do they move to do some type of a 2010 type black activities? And we're in an environment now where I yes, that we will be responding. That's what the South Korean government has said. So I think that, I'm glad to see that the alliance is working towards ensuring that they're prepared for that. But I think that this kind of rhetoric, it seems like it's more I agree with what other observers have said, that it's more in line with what they've been saying. It's increasing, but I think that there's that concern of those leading to low threshold type of provocations, and ensuring that we're ready for that, and wondering how North Korea is going to respond. Beginning to respond.
And it's election season, so as a shot shows us with this beyond parallel data set, they love the tests that provoke around South Korean elections and US elections. So we got both of them this year.
Yeah.
And potentially Japan as well. That could be an election.
Right.
So let's go to Rob, one of my students. We'll get you a microphone, Rob.
Thank you. And that's true. Commander Taylor. This is a question about the intersection of efficacy and sanctions and missile capability. As the US and South Korea are seeking to apply pressure on an expanding North Korean missile capability, what particular capabilities can the DPRK not produce in-house that are effective targets for sanctioning? What do they seek to gain from Soviet or from the Russians or from allies?
So what are they seeking to gain from the relationship with us?
Specifically, like technical capabilities of missile guidance systems, and what can they not make so that they have to see?
So maybe something like a MERV, right?
Yeah, I'm not, I remember I talked about some of the things that they're looking at, receiving. I want to give you more details, maybe it's not in these notes, but I don't know off the top of my head, but I can. It's a minute. I can get you. If you want to bring it,
Yeah, it would ascertain that they're looking for help with like their satellite capability, like lenses for that satellite. I would also consider more help in their solid fuel missile capabilities and also their submarine capabilities and nuclear submarine capabilities, so they can have a more secured if they can like gain a second strike capability, or like some of the things that I would think that they're things that they would want.
Yeah, the things I have here is. Fighter aircraft, surface to air missiles, armored vehicles, missile production equipment or materials, and other advanced technologies. So that's our assessment. We don't know exactly what they're looking for, but that's our assessment.
And in terms of the ballistic missiles, one of the real big concerns is the MERV, so multiple independently targetable reentry vehicles. They're still working on the reentry vehicle to come back into the atmosphere. And if they were to be able to deliver a payload of multiple warheads per missile, that could quickly overwhelm our missile defense. That would be a real blow to the deterrence posture that Russia is poised to help them out. Russia's really good at MERVs. They've done it for years. So that's a real concern. Can we get another one? Yeah. We'll get a microphone over to you.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Raquel Miller, and I'm the founder of Bunchful Enterprise. We are a social enterprise organization. And as I listen today to, the world teetering again, continues to teeter on this tension, and, don't provoke us. What is that list of provocations? My question is a different angle. So we are very much engaged in advancing the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals for a better world. And we actually shine the spotlight on those who are, through philanthropy, helping to move toward achievement of these goals. And so my question is, how can civil society, how can social enterprises engage effectively and help toward just achieving some modicum of engagement or just helping toward achieving some better stance, I guess?
That's a great question. So what can ordinary folks do and civil society groups outside of the government to help with stabilizing the Korean Peninsula, promoting peace elsewhere as well?
But I have a specific answer that's not directly. I'm trying to figure out. There's a lot that's happening I'll start from there. There are things that are happening in we call the hard security area, which is what we're talking about, that are promoting sustainable development goals. And I could talk about that. I'm trying to figure out how to connect it to DPRK and how it can be helped. The DPRK is a hard case. It's hard to think about how we can really.
Yeah, don't feel limited there.
Yeah, that's that. Yeah, I just want to say that's a tough case to draw in many ways. But there are many things that we do in the hard security field that do promote sustainable development goals. In fact, my 3 bureaus in August, when I asked them what are they doing to lay out for me the 17 goals? And what are they doing related to that? No one thinks about SDGs in these spaces, right? And I get the question very often in bilaterals from countries, particularly the global south. What are you doing for SDGs? We can see in other parts, but when it comes to hard security, it's very, very challenging. And they came back with like a 33-page document and listed, which I was it was very interesting because look at all the things that we're doing in the SDGs that related to the SDGs. And it was great because then I'm able to use that when I have my balance. Everything from, there's a lot in the nuclear technology field that's promoting things like promoting cancer treatments, water sanitation, food security. The IAEA has some habits with food. They have Rays of Hope, which is helping countries with cancer treatment. In the United States, we have something called the Sustainable Dialogue, where we put money, where we work with the UK on this. We work with countries in the global south to promote issues that are for sustainable development for them. And this is all based on nuclear technology. But there's also other things. I mean, when you talk about getting rid of chemical weapons, which the US got involved with nuclear chemical weapons last year, it's a big accomplishment. And how that is, what does that open up in terms of not putting money toward those things, not sustaining those things, and what that can be used for in terms of development. We talk about another part of my bureau that gets rid of. The US puts the most money in any country toward landmine removal and destroying unexploded ordnances. We have stories where we have NGOs who work with us. There's in Vietnam, there's an NGO for women who are doing demining. And there's stories about how the landmines we got rid of allows for endangered species to come back in parts of the world. It's so many things in terms of the hard security space. There's what we talked about. So there's a lot that doesn't get attention in terms of how hard security, the work we're doing to make the world a better, safe place, which people don't think about hard security, but this is not what we're doing. We're getting rid of weapons and we're getting rid of landmines, and we're trying to have countries live to the norm of not developing nuclear weapons, chemical, biological weapons, not using them. These all are promoting peace. They're promoting ability to do more in development. And so I'm glad you asked the question because I spent a lot of time thinking about that and thinking about how NGOs and civil society can help us get that message out there, particularly to countries who don't think that there's things that we do not, and partly our fault, we haven't made that case. And even so, my bureaus were surprised by the 33-page document. Wow, So, I gave a speech on this at the Stimson Center, which is a think tank in DC. And so my goal is to have more of these conversations, and happy to have civil society research institutes think about how you can help me get that. So it's not particularly nuclear, but there is it's nuclear, it's a little bit.
That's a great answer. I learned a lot. That's good.
Yeah, I think we're at a great place to talk about that because we're at the Korea Society and getting the message out. I think that's one of the things that organizations can do to help us educate the public on the issues. And just coming back from South Korea, actually engaged with a couple organizations that help defectors resettle. And it was really eye-opening, the amounts of support that they need. And I think just the education, like I've learned so much, even though I focus in this space, there's just a lot that I didn't realize. So I think those types of organizations are also often overlooked and should happen.
So many people to thank for making this program possible. First, of course, the investor buying Jenkins and Major Jessica. Can you please help me give them a nice Thank you to Patrick, Marina, and everybody. You were such a delight to work with. And thank you to my team, Chelsea in the back there. Chelsea, thank you very much. Peter Bradley made sure that the production works wonderfully. Tashi and Heiji, our wonderful interns who are around in the back there. You did such a wonderful job. Thank you all for coming in person. We've got some dumplings for you in there, so stick around, hang out, eat lunch, get to meet our speakers. And thank you so much for coming to the Creative Society. Thanks, everybody. Right, you did it.
Oh, no.